For a long time, it has been assumed that globalization erased geography, that modern trade floats above terrain, borders, and distance, that fiber optic cables and container ships dissolved the old limits that once shaped empires. History, in this view, became optional, patterns became obsolete, yet trade continues to move along familiar lines. Ports rise where ports once mattered. Routes thicken where caravans once passed. Certain corridors absorb pressure again and again, even as technologies change. The map seems to remember something that policy often forgets. This episode examines whether China's contemporary trade strategies represent innovation alone, or whether they reflect the return of older geographic logics, not as intention, not as revival in name, but as recurrence in structure. It is not a story of strategy or ambition. It is an inquiry into why certain pathways persist across centuries, even when belief systems and tools transform. Long before nation-states, before modern economics, trade followed constraint. Mountain passes narrowed movement. Deserts concentrated traffic into oases. Rivers reduced friction. Seas connected what land separated. These were not choices. They were pressures. Across Eurasia, trade did not spread evenly. It condensed. A lattice of routes emerged, shaped less by culture than by terrain, climate, and distance. Over time, these routes acquired names, rituals, and meanings. But beneath the symbolism was repetition. The Silk Roads were not a single road, nor a deliberate design. They were an accumulation of workable paths through resistance. China's position within this system was not accidental. Its river basins opened eastward. Its western frontiers narrowed into corridors. Its coast faced productive seas. Trade flowed outward, where friction was lowest, and inward, where access could be controlled. Empires rose and fell, but the geography endured. When dynasties collapsed, trade thinned but did not vanish. When borders shifted, routes bent rather than broke. Merchants adjusted, goods rerouted, the structure absorbed change. Centuries later, the modern world declared those routes finished. Steam engines, railways, and global shipping promised liberation from terrain. Trade would no longer follow ancient constraints. It would follow efficiency alone. But efficiency, too, has limits. Modern supply chains depend on choke points, straits, canals, ports, rail junctions. These are not new inventions. They are compressions of movement forced by geography. The scale has changed, the logic has not. China's contemporary trade expansion appears, at first glance, unprecedented. High-speed rail across continents, ports financed far from home. Logistics networks stretching into Africa, Europe, and Central Asia. The language is modern, the tools are modern, but the paths feel familiar. Rail lines converge through Central Asian basins long used by caravans. Maritime routes cluster along coastlines that once hosted tribute fleets. Inland corridors follow valleys and passes mapped long before satellites. Even digital trade relies on undersea cables laid along stable seabeds, once navigated by ancient sailors. This is not imitation. There is no need for nostalgia. The recurrence emerges from constraint. Trade seeks reliability. Reliability seeks geography that resists disruption. Certain paths offer this again and again. Ancient systems did not persist because they were admired. They persisted because alternatives were worse. Deserts punish deviation. Mountains resist dispersion. Oceans reward consistent lanes. The world quietly enforces these rules, regardless of era. China's modern trade architecture operates within this pressure. Investment follows corridors where infrastructure compounds value. Control gathers where flow cannot easily escape. The pattern is not ancient wisdom rediscovered. It is ancient constraint resurfacing. Over time, meaning accumulates around these structures. Roots become symbols. Hubs acquire identity. Influence is attributed to intention rather than position. But the system does not require belief to function. When ancient trade declined, It was not because roots lost relevance. It was because political cohesion fractured, security dissolved, maintenance failed. The geography remained, waiting. Today's global system faces different pressures: congested seas, fragile supply chains, rising uncertainty. In response, trade does what it has always done. It thickens along dependable lines. It narrows through manageable corridors. It avoids dispersion when dispersion increases risk. This does not imply inevitability of dominance or decline. It implies repetition of structure. Geography offers a limited menu. Civilizations reorder it, but cannot replace it. China's trade expansion often appears strategic because it aligns with visible routes. But visibility itself is a function of compression. Where movement condenses, attention follows. Where attention gathers, meaning is projected. Ancient empires misread this pattern as destiny. Modern states risk misreading it as control. In both cases, the system quietly resists ownership. Trade networks are not static. They pulse, they thicken, thin, reroute, and recombine. But the underlying lattice remains surprisingly stable. Disruptions rarely erase it. They temporarily obscure it. Even collapse does not dismantle these systems. It pauses them. Later, under different names and technologies, they resume. The belief that modernity escapes recurrence is powerful. It reassures, it flatters innovation, but it often ignores constraint. Ancient wisdom in this context is not philosophy passed down. It is the accumulated memory of terrain. The Earth does not forget, it waits. China's position within this memory is not unique, but it is pronounced. Its scale amplifies structural effects. Its connectivity reactivates dormant corridors. Not because the past is being revived, but because the past was never removed. This raises an uncomfortable tension. If systems recur independent of belief, how much agency remains? Are choices shaping routes, or are routes shaping choices? The question is not whether China is reviving ancient trade geography. The question is whether any civilization ever truly abandons it, or whether each era simply re-enters the same structures, convinced they are new. Perhaps what appears strategic is often adaptive. Perhaps what seems intentional is sometimes inevitable. And perhaps the most enduring patterns are those that operate without asking to be understood. If geography continues to exert this quiet pressure, then modern trade is not a break from history, but a continuation under different names. Innovation accelerates movement, but it does not flatten constraint. Belief celebrates novelty, but the system prefers familiarity. In this light, ancient roots are not resurrected. They are recognized again under pressure. The unresolved question is not about China alone. It is about how often civilizations mistake recurrence for choice, and whether awareness of these patterns grants freedom or simply reveals the limits within which freedom operates. History does not repeat itself loudly. It repeats softly through structure. And trade, more than ideology, listens. The map remains. The lines thicken where they always have. And meaning arrives later, searching for explanations that geography never needed. If this story gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to Timeless Questions. We explore history, philosophy, and the patterns that quietly guide human behavior.